4:33, and you are now live.
All right, thank you. I guess we'll call this meeting to order. It's a meeting of the Legislative Committee. Do we have anybody observing?
You have 3.
Okay, fine. Welcome. I'll just do the roll call, and I am John Rafter, and I'm here. Luke Murphy.
Here.
And Dave Risberger.
Here.
And Katie Lapari-Shu.
Here.
All right, first order of business. Do we have any reason to, do we want to approve the minutes, or do we have any comments or changes? They look fine to me. Okay, we can approve the minutes. I think we're in agreement. Now, public comment. That's odd. No, well, it's on the regular agenda if we had public, but let's move past that for the moment and to our topics. And I see that we have the beekeeping ordinance. Is Steve Yearley in the room? Okay.
He is not present at the moment.
Okay. It's here. And as I recall at the last meeting, I was suggesting that we just look again at the draft amendments to Chapter 68 that Steve had prepared and see if we have any comments on that from anyone who's on the committee. And let's start with that. Any thoughts on Steve's draft? To my mind, we've got really 2 things we could do, which is lay this as a proposal on the full council and have it for discussion by the entire council, or we could say, why not? And what would the reasons to not do that be? And what would we do is instead of moving this forward? So thoughts on that? Dave?
Well, I'll be honest. On one hand, I understand the need for, I understand the problems we have with the bee population and the importance of it. And I also know a lot of cities have enacted bee ordinances to allow downtown beekeeping. I still have an awful lot of questions about it, a lot of concerns. I put it out to my ward, just the question of what a few people thought. And it was really 50-50 split on what people thought, but the people that didn't want it were exactly what I was afraid of. It was people that have bee allergies. And I think there's a real visceral, people are either going to be for it, or there's going to be a real visceral negative reaction toward it, because we're not talking chickens, we're talking bees. And but just similar to the chicken ordinance, we're not really, we don't have any teeth to making people follow the rules with it. And I think possibly even less so with a bee ordinance. If there's an issue that people have with a hive and the bees swarm outside the hive, we have no way to take care of it immediately. We're going to be relying on volunteers to do that. So I still have a lot of concerns with it. We haven't talked water source, if water sources are going to be required, and how are we going to enforce that? That way we don't have bees using somebody's pool as their water source. Are we going to have people register with the Department of Health, register with us, or both? I still have a lot of questions, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Sure. Others, Luke?
I have concerns. Not to the extent that Dave does. I think in my mind, yes, there's some questions I additionally have similar to Dave's, but in terms of the potential benefits of it economically for the folks that are doing it, as well as environmentally for the city, I think they've been proven in small cities across the state to have be a net. And I think it's also just another thing for us to be able to say how we are not changing with the times, so to speak, but enacting trends that are of interest to folks within the city. And I think that's probably the extent of my thoughts on it, John.
Katie?
Yeah, I have no problem moving this forward to council. I just want to be sure though that I'm looking at the right thing, because the one that I reread was actually sent to us by Dave Merzig.
Yeah.
And I guess it was a model maybe that was used in the village of Walton. That did seem to reasonably address some of Dave's concerns. I know that it had water was in there as a subsection. I think Stephen kind of mentioned to us last time that there isn't really a good way to enforce it sort of with or without the ordinance. And so not doing anything doesn't solve the problem either. So I feel like at least if we have a broader discussion and we bring more light to it, we may hear from the public, since it would be a local law, if we have a broader discussion on it. So, I mean, it's probably better than just spinning our wheels here on it for another month or so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my thought is similar to that, Katie, that at least bringing it further, we could have the council say, and my guess is there's going to be not resistance, but there's going to be concern from the council about similar things, or because I don't know anything about beekeeping. I kind of spray toxins on them if they seem to be doing their thing on my porch or in a corner of so I don't know. Now the question for me is, I don't know that we'll have any expertise on the council. So this has been proposed from the environmental group. I don't know if people need to do more research on it for us. I don't know that we're in a good position to do anything except some people are afraid of bees and some people love to do it. And that's, I don't know where to go with that. So Luke, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the things that might be helpful bringing it to council is, even though you're right, I don't think we have any beekeeping experts. I know Mark Davies has worked pretty closely with the environmental board. He may be able to answer some of our more pressing questions, or if we wish to send it back to legislative for amendment based on what he said or what's brought up, because we can send it back to legislative, right? If that's what the council decides what they want to do.
Oh, I'd assume that if we send it forward and we had questions from the council about anything,
okay,
we could turn to some expert sources, so to speak.
Sure.
But we have, as I believe Steve tried to do his best he could using the other model. There are a lot of beekeeping ordinances that are on the that are available online, and the only person I know who does beekeeping almost was killed by his bees, but he's all for it. He just said, I didn't realize I had an allergy that would be popping up. And he was hospitalized, etc. And that got me thinking about what happens if the only person who winds up perishing because of the bees is the one who's raising them. So, I don't know. So Dave,
So what ordinance are you looking to push forward to the council?
I was going to suggest, the ordinance that was provided to us by Dave Merzig is something he literally took down from the internet, no editing. He said, I just found one, looked pretty, two.
Does anybody have the date of when that was sent out? Because I haven't been able to find it since he sent it.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't have it on my, I would have sent it out, but I don't have it any longer, but I have paper copies.
So we're looking to send,
I don't know. That's
It was
just some,
December
the
4th,
options are.
Dave.
okay, thanks,
The
Kate.
one that
Yeah.
Dave sent is not formatted to meet any of our code, and the one that was put in front of the environmental committee that they drafted off of what I sent them is based on a more modern code from Buffalo,
Mhm.
and it's
And
been
was
set
that-
up to meet their zoning requirements.
When was that sent out, Stephen?
It was the original. It was part of the original agenda. It's what Carrie provided from the reason this is in front of you guys is because the environmental board put it in front of the legislative.
Mhm.
And so that was sent out with on the 4th, like Katie was talking about, the same one with Merzig?
I'm assuming yes. I would guess.
Steve,
Mhm.
um, are you comfortable with the one you put together, or would you suggest moving that forward as?
Yeah, I
your
mean,
best
as it
work?
stands now, we are not enforcing anything related to bees. So, like,
Mhm.
if we got a call and someone complained their neighbor had a beehive, we probably wouldn't. I mean, we'd have to take them to court, and it would be ineffective at best. I mean, we're not out writing tickets to people that keep bees.
Mhm.
Why would it be ineffective to take somebody to court
Because
for having
I
a
mean, the
beehive?
judge might enforce it. We've taken people to court over having too many dogs or unlicensed dogs, and it was basically thrown out. So, I mean, we could try to write a ticket for beekeeping. I don't know how
Well,
effective it would be.
we don't have anything on the books that says you can't have a beehive on your property. Is that it?
We do.
Oh, so they are forbidden now?
Yeah, they are currently considered livestock.
So that doesn't make any sense that they couldn't be ticketed then.
You can write a ticket. It's just you have to actually get the judge to enforce it. So, I mean, we have a hard time getting actual like life safety stuff in court. So, like, I guess the intent of this legislation is to at least provide guidelines for someone that is potentially keeping bees. We could clarify with the court if they would, enforce a ticket that we wrote for beekeeping. But yeah, so that's kind of the situation we're in.
I'll be honest. I mean, if we have something on the books now and we write a ticket and it won't be enforced, and we're talking about allowing beekeeping with specific rules, and it sounds like if we write a ticket, it still won't be enforced. I mean, that's alarming to me.
Well, I can understand that. What would we do if someone was keeping a lamb?
Yeah, you'd write a ticket and you'd be like,
Wow.
they're keeping livestock in the city, and you'd hope the
So
court enforced it.
we would find that lamb, call you, and you'd give the lamb owner a ticket.
Correct. Yep. It's just like the chicken ordinance. I mean, if a random chicken's wandering around town, I don't ticket the chicken. I mean, there's no.
No, I
mean,
just meant the term, it's what's considered livestock.
Yeah, so the city defines bees as livestock.
Okay.
It would be just like a cow. We specifically allow chickens and we consider them not livestock. So I mean, like, it would be difficult for me to write a ticket if there just happens to be a bee, or if someone has a barrel that has bees in it. I mean, it's the same as the chickens. There's really no good mechanism to ticket bees.
Mhm. Gary, sorry.
Stephen, I would suggest that you contact Bob Goulden, who's the city prosecutor, and get his opinion on the value and how he feels about prosecuting tickets under the current prohibition against bees.
Sure.
So it doesn't sound, we think we want to move this forward. We will just look at this and know that some people support it and think it will save the planet, and other people think it'll just wind up stinging us somewhere.
I
No,
think that oversimplifies it though, John.
it does.
Yeah.
So we will declare that they're not livestock. Bees are, that we would have some sort of a code, like a chicken is no longer considered livestock, although they act like it. And that bees, if we approve them, will be no longer livestock.
I would just like to say, so if we choose not to do anything with it here, is it kind of kaput at this point?
No, I'm done. I feel like I'm kind of done with it. I don't want to stop it from moving forward. I'd support that if people wanted to do it. But if we want to do other investigation or ask Steve to investigate it further, that's fine too. And then we have the question of if it's unenforceable because we couldn't get our attorney to take it into court. I don't know what to say.
Well, it sounds like we're not enforcing it now. And then
Can
if
I
we're-
just make a quick comment?
Sure.
I don't think it has much to do with enforcement as much as adjudication. So we can bring
Yeah.
the ticket and it'll get prosecuted by the prosecutor, but if the judge doesn't rule in the favor of the city, it gets dismissed.
And then it takes probably 4 months to go to court. So, I mean, it's one of those things where you can write a ticket. I mean, it might take 4 months to go from A to B, and it might be moved 7 times and pled down, and yeah, I mean,
Thanks for the clarification. You're absolutely right on that. That's also makes me think, okay, if we allow it, but we have rules, are we going to enforce the rules? Or not enforce? Are we going to, anybody who gets ticketed for not following the rules, are there going to be consequences for that? And if there's no consequences, why would we open the floodgates for it? It's just something seems wacky about this. I think if we can figure out, I think talking to Bob Golden first is a good idea. Get his impression of it, and maybe to bring it back for discussion after we talk to him.
Can I just ask a quick
Sure.
question? So when we write a ticket for someone, for whether it's they have improper conditions or their hive is a nuisance or something like that, and then Stephen, you had said that the difference in time between writing a ticket and the time that they go to court is often months. Do they keep their hive as is in that time, or are they required
I mean,
to?
if we write, so like today, if we do an inspection on a property and find, like, I don't know, 6 unrelated people in a 2-bedroom apartment,
Mhm.
we write a ticket, and that ticket might go to court, but it might not actually be heard for 3 or 4 months.
Okay.
And then at that point, the judge, if the property owner has an attorney, might move that trial or come back 3 months later to see if they corrected it. And if they haven't, then the judge will say, well, we'll give them 2 more months. And then, so, I mean, some of these processes take they're longer than the lease terms.
Right.
So like using that as an example, I mean, we might find a hive of bees and we could ticket the person every day, assuming that eventually those tickets will be heard, but they might amount to nothing.
Right. And in the meantime, they keep their hive is my question. And every,
Violation continues and you just
okay,
hope that eventually those tickets add up to something.
gotcha. So it doesn't really solve the problem of like, if there's a nuisance, a
Right.
ticket doesn't solve that problem. So,
Correct. So like the example of like the Oneonta Hotel, I mean, we went to the Supreme Court and it took us, you know, almost 2 years to correct those conditions.
I think if we were able to find, like when we've talked about this before, I could be swayed with a special use permit, or if we had somehow a way to add teeth to the ordinance of enforcement, I'd feel more comfortable. But for me, it really comes down to how do we protect those that are allergic, and this is going to create a real unhappy situation if somebody next door decides to put in a beehive. And I understand it's European honeybees and they're fairly docile, but it's that visceral reaction, and then God forbid they actually do get stung. Then what's the city's liability in this? I just don't know. That's a question for Dave Merzig.
I think after this discussion, agree with Dave to a certain extent that if we pass this ordinance as it is, that we're not really changing the effectiveness of whether they're considered livestock or considered pets, I guess. So I think for me, I would want to see, because to his point, like people will be like, oh, cool, we can keep bees. Maybe I'll just try that. And, you know, you could have some really inexperienced people out there just give it a shot. And, you know, we don't really have a mechanism to remove that potential harm, you know. So I think that if we were to require, I know there's a permitting process that we're trying to work through. I think if we were to require some sort of beekeeping course certification or something beforehand, we would sort of discourage some of the people who may be likely to just, you know, give it a go on a whim. And you might get people who are a bit more serious about it if they have that additional hoop to jump through.
And Luke?
No, I think the course makes sense. I think I have a friend who does beekeeping, and to my knowledge, it's and I could be wrong, so please correct me if I am. But to my knowledge, it's kind of hard to pick up on a whim. I think between investing in the hives and the bees, it can run into the thousands of dollars. But I guess, I mean, that's not to prevent someone from, like, you know, collecting bees and putting them in a box or something.
My bee collection.
Yeah.
So I mean, one thing that we've done, and we use this in the rental ordinance, is we require annual or semi-annual or once every 3-year type inspections to verify that the building meets the housing code. I mean, what we can do is we could just attach an administrative fee process to it. So like we would do an inspection, we would verify that the hives were located where they were supposed to be, that there was a water source, and failure to comply with that ordinance would be tied to administrative penalties instead of court penalties. So like, for example, right now we require an annual smoke detector form be turned in. If the property owner fails to do that, we hit them with a $250 fee through the office, not through the court. And then every day that they don't have that form turned in, they're billed $7. So there's a daily penalty that comes to the office that's not through the court, but is instead through like an administrative process. So then you could add, you know, if you're not following the rules, you can add, you know, kind of a more, you know, there's much more incentive to follow the rules.
Dave, what are your thoughts on that? It sounds like it's giving it a little bit more teeth, or not enforceability, but collectability.
Unless you have somebody that decides they still don't want to, they're not going to worry about the paying the fees, because the fees just get tacked onto their taxes and they don't even see that till the end of the year. And they could just ignore it. And then do we have the capability to go in and make the changes for them? And from what I know, we don't have that legal authority to do that, because that's trespassing on people's property.
Well, I don't know how to get out of this.
Well, it may be talk to Bob Goulden first and see what the issue is with the judicial side of this, with the issues we have now versus if any ordinance got passed. Get his opinion on it and then go from there. And it may be that we don't do anything, or it may be that we pass an ordinance.
Gary,
Just procedure-wise, just a reminder that the role of the committee is to lay an proposed ordinance on the desks of the council members to vote on. So we don't have anything until the committee has an ordinance that you're comfortable with. And then the next step would be to lay it on the desks of the rest of the council members.
in a way, that's an inclination I have to say we can dance around this forever, for a long time. And we may, and when you're talking about people being allergic to something or fearing something, in some ways, if my, I'll just leave it at that. I'm almost inclined to say, bring it to the council. The council's going to have a lot of the same questions we have, and it'll get kicked back somewhere. But just for someone to say, geez, I wouldn't want to prosecute on the bees any more than I want a kid who has a lamb. I brought up the lamb intentionally because the lamb's not going to hurt anybody, I think, till later. And when you start talking about livestock in the city, you know, it sounds like an umbrella term that is a little odd to me. But
So what I'll do is I'll take what we have, what the environmental board put together. I'll contact Bob Goulden and ask him about the court stuff. And I'll tie the administrative fee process into the permitting process so that we can at least have some sort of structure there. And then we can come back.
okay,
I would suggest that those that support this are the ones who should be stepping up and working with Stephen to try to develop an ordinance that you think will work and will be supported by the rest of the council. I mean, ultimately, it's all about what specifically is this ordinance going to say. It's not about, do I like the idea of beekeeping or not? So if there are members of this committee who want to see us get to the point of allowing beekeeping, then I would say you should feel tasked with the job of working with Stephen to come up with an ordinance that you think is workable and can be approved.
Stephen, I'd be happy to work with you on this.
Great.
okay.
Sorry, John. Stephen, would you mind resending the ordinance that
Sure.
the environmental board put forward? Because I can't find it, and I guess I was reading the wrong one. So
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I know there's a couple floating around. I had sent this originally at the environmental board's request, and they had reformatted it, but it had the same material in it. So I'll go back to the version that I had sent to them and that we kind of all discussed. And I'll add the sections that we kind of talked about tonight, and then I'll send out that version to everybody. And then we can go from there.
thank you.
All right. If we're moving on with then to the next one is the fire hydrant snow removal. And I didn't quite realize it. I know I saw that we did, in fact, from Greg, get a modification of the ordinance. But we had there was more of a talk about whether we want to include clearing actually being a legal, a code requirement for the property owner who happens to have a hydrant on their property. I've heard people also talking about not wanting to saddle a person with the requirement to do that. And Katie sent some things around about making it more of a facilitated volunteer assignment. Katie, do you want to talk more about that? Oh, I'm sorry, Gary.
Well, I was just going to say that it may be pertinent to take a look at what the mayor of Ithaca has implemented.
Yeah.
He's put together a program that I think he calls Snow Angels. And he comes and he actually created probably a GPS map online that marks, I think, fire hydrants as well as the intersections, access to the intersections, which are so hard to shovel, even by most homeowners, because it gets so densely packed by the plow. And people volunteer to sign up, and I'm sure groups, church, colleges, schools, would do so as well. They volunteer to take responsibility for a fire hydrant or an intersection. And they sign up as a snow angel, and this is all tracked online with the different locations. Probably can go on the Ithaca website and get all the details about it. But to me, it seems as a innovative idea, uses technology to help implement it, and gives the many people out there who love to contribute and enjoy a little shoveling as exercise outdoors, the opportunity to provide it. And it's a feel good and win-win for everybody.
And Katie, did you send that out to everyone on this committee?
Yeah, that's the that's the information that I had shared via email. One of the other things that I think is nice about that is, and Mary, you did a really good job covering it, that you can also, as a member of if you have the app and you're a member of the Snow Angels, you can report, and not for the purposes of fines or whatever, but just so that I could say my elderly neighbor's sidewalk isn't shoveled, and someone could go, it would ping, and someone nearby would be able to go and assist with that shoveling, which I think is great. Kind of an elegant solution.
Svante Myrick, the mayor of Ithaca, who took office as one of the youngest mayors in the state in his 20s, is a very dynamic, innovative fellow, and I'm sure he would have no objections to us stealing his idea from him.
He has no rights to it, but I'd agree with that. Stealing ideas, I don't know if he's copyrighted any of these things. Can we lift it from his website? And can we get the software? No, but seriously, that's fine.
If I can jump in, just, I've spoken to Brian Fleury in my office, our GIS engineering technician, about this a little bit. We're going to start looking into what it would take to develop something like this. I don't think it's something we can, develop overnight or in a week, but we can talk to Ithaca, learn about how they did it, and just see what we could do in the future. I think in the meantime, Stephen and I talked a little bit about just reaching out to SUNY. He has contacts with the fraternities there who help out with other tasks around the neighborhood. Maybe we can get something going in the meantime. I don't know if you have anything more to add about Stephen or Chris.
Just for the group, I reached out to Franklin Chambers regarding their student involvement last week. I sent him an email. He thought that was a great idea and was going to start reaching out to some of his student ambassadors to try to start that up locally with the hydrants that may be nearest their houses.
Yeah, they have that plan for a local area, good citizen thing. So that's perfect.
So soon I can expect students to clear off the hydrant in my lawn.
They might be
I'll
able
do
to
it.
incorporate this into the
I'm
lead
just going to do
system
it
they've
for my
got there.
tax reduction, Chris.
Luke, what was that you said?
I said this sounds like something that could be incorporated into the lead system, which is their service system, the tiered system that tracks service throughout the college, your college experience. It's called LEAD, LEAD. They had it when I was there. I assume it's still there.
Yeah, they still have it.
It wasn't that
All right.
long ago I was there.
So we'll get that off the agenda now. Is that okay?
Well, we're going to bring it back next month to see where Greg's.
We have no legislation. We're just looking for a volunteer system of some sort.
Right, but Greg's going to follow up. Greg, am I correct? You're going to follow up with Ithaca and see how they are doing it and what it would take for us to implement something like that?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's something that'll be ready in a month. I mean, I think that's more of a long-term goal, but I think maybe we focus on our building a partnership with SUNY. We can come back and report on that if you'd like.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. If you could report back in a month to see where you are. I don't want this. I don't want to forget about this, I guess, is what I'm saying. And I'm sure nobody else does either. So if you can come back and report on it, see where you are and if there's anything else you might need from us at that point.
Okay.
Now, snow emergency parking enforcement. Greg, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. Yeah, Chris and I can tag team this one. So in our last snowstorm, we had, what was it, 236 cars plus or minus that were ticketed overnight. That were obviously left on the streets. I went around and did an audit of the parking lots and the parking garage. All the public lots were less than 50% utilized at 7 a.m. morning after the heavy snowfall. Obviously, we put out our PSA we normally put out, advising people the lots were open and free and trying to get people, encourage them to get their cars off the street. Obviously, it's not great compliance, and it's really not practical to start towing 236 cars, and Chris can talk some more about the logistical concerns with towing, not to mention the causing anger and amongst people who have their cars towed. But ultimately, we started talking about how do we get better compliance, and that's the real end goal here, is to make it a safe and efficient job for DPW to clear the streets and for people to get around and not leave piles of snow where cars were parked and not moved. So ultimately, what we'd like to recommend is increasing the snow parking ticket fee. So if your car is on the street after what the code says is 2.5 inches of snow, and again, the reason for that funny number is that's about the amount of snow after which we need to start plowing. So, but if you do get a ticket right now, it's $30. It doesn't seem to be that big of a deterrent given the amount of non-compliance that we have, and the fact that we do have available free parking spaces during a snow emergency to park the car. So we're asking that we consider increasing that to $100 a pop. Chris, if you want to jump in now and kind of just explain your perspective.
So in my time at the police department, typically at the beginning of snowfall, just after December generally is when we have the big consistent snows. We find that we tow during the first event well over 100 cars, and when it starts to wane, we're still towing 30 to 50 cars, and even more in some instances. So when we impound the vehicles, we have to clear a lot. The officers have to be assigned between 1 and 4 to 6 tow trucks that they're responsible for. We usually do 2 units just towing. The tow trucks lift the vehicles and take them down to the park. But prior to them being lifted, we have to inspect them for damage, radio the damage to dispatch. It has to be recorded. The location has to be recorded. The tow operator needs to register it as a vehicle that they towed, so there's some accountability there. And the officer that's towing the vehicle has to have a log that matches with all of their tow truck operators. So there's a lot of paperwork that's involved in this, and the release of the vehicles falls to whoever is desk personnel for that day, who may be a dispatcher, officer, civilian employee at the station, who collects either cash or credit card. They have to, take the money, run the card, handle the receipt, and then we have to arrange for transport or meet them one way or the other in the park to release the vehicle. So this is a very laborious process that we have, requires oftentimes 4 people dedicated just to doing the work. And it hasn't been done in 3 or 4 years. So we don't have very many people that are polished enough to do this without having some serious complications. So the suggestion of $100 ticket, I think, would gain us compliance, significant compliance, especially if people are getting multiple tickets. There's not going to be as much repeat offenders given the amount of the ticket fine if it goes up to $100. So we would be hoping for much fewer cars towed and much higher compliance rates.
Dave,
I only asked this question because I remember back 30 some odd years ago, a friend of mine that went to school in Providence, Long Island, and racked up tons of parking tickets that he stuffed in his glove box, figuring he could just leave school and they'd never catch him. And they eventually did, but it took years. So I guess my question is, and this might be a question, well, I don't know who it's a question for. What's the process now if we have somebody that has multiple parking tickets for whatever reason, and they're just not compliant with showing up to court or paying the fine? What happens?
So my understanding is that the finance department uploads in our parking enforcement database a list of people that are serial offenders and in arrears for fines. And when they reach a certain threshold, the vehicles then get towed, but they get towed back to the tow company, and they can't be released until the fines are paid. The parking fines are paid in full.
Okay, it sounds like it's a lot harder to get away with not paying the fines nowadays with everything digital. And
Yeah, well, given our digital system currently, it's more efficient than it had been in the past with paper tickets, for sure.
okay, because I definitely can see some people just trying to ignore them temporarily, but it may be there's going to be a learning curve before people realize they can't get away with it. So
Luke,
This might be a little bit of like pie in the sky thinking. I totally agree that we need to increase the penalty for parking violations, especially considering how difficult it is for those who have to find spots. Would it be possible to consider potentially doing volunteer hours instead of fines? Is there a system that we have for that, or I'm just thinking, $100 to some people is a lot of money, and $100 to another person might just be, well, I'll pay it off when I get a chance.
Currently, nothing for parking enforcement as far as community service. That's something that would have to be taken up with the courts. That would be a judicial issue, and the judge would have to order that as service in lieu of fine.
And Luke, and not only is that not a decision we can make, it's a decision that the judge makes. Then who is the judge referring them to organize, come up with the tasks, supervise, hold people accountable, do the paperwork, and all of that?
so it sounds to me, oh, Katie, you didn't say anything yet.
I didn't. I support it.
Dave?
yeah, the only other question I have, because I support it also, is I know that every time we've talked about increasing fines, the city attorney has to remind us that there's a limit to how much of an increase we can have on fines. has anybody talked, is $100 doable? I mean, that's the first number that popped into my head as soon as we were talking about increasing fines, but do we know if it's a doable number?
In my professional opinion, I think it is, because we're not anywhere near the threshold for maximum on what would be considered a fine for vehicle and traffic enforcement. This would be vehicle and traffic enforcement, which would be a maximum limit of $250.
Oh, okay.
And Chris, this is a little bit less than the parking in a handicap spot fee currently, right?
That's correct, but there's state mandated minimums on the handicap parking plus a surcharge, I believe, that goes to the county. Those tickets are currently at $150. But again, there's some state legislation that requires them to meet a certain mandatory minimum fine. Whereas in this instance, I'm not 100% certain, but I think $100 is well within range. And it may be something I have to just confirm with Attorney Merzig over, but I think it's well within the range.
Okay. Any more comments? I'm fine with moving it forward to a $100 fine. Like fire hydrants, I think fines work rather than establishing a network of good workers, good volunteer people. I'm just noticing the contrast, being punitive about cars and very wanting to do an elaborate sort of scheme to inspire people to take care of one another. So there we go. We're done, do you think, or do we have some more, any other business?
Will that change be on the next council agenda then?
I think it would
Longer
be.
than that.
If that's what you'd like, I don't see why it needs to
Yeah.
take longer. We can check with Attorney Merzig and then draft the motion.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I'm just-
prefer it to not be on the agenda in the spring.
No, I think, I don't do, this isn't as if we need a council approval because the council decides on fine limits.
Right.
And I don't think we need to propose that. We can decide on the spot that at the next meeting, we have enough votes, 5 votes, and it'll be $100 fine. Good. Okay, I think we're done unless there's other business. Done. Hello?
Nothing here.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Get out.
Have a good night, everybody.
Take care.